All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here in person or online. It's wonderful to see you. My name is Deborah Margolis. I'm the Middle East Studies librarian. I work with the Muslim Studies program. We're so excited to have Dr. Aida Bamia with us tonight at the library. She had a very long journey today, so but we're here. We're so grateful. Thank you to the library for supporting this program and all of our programs and the Muslim Studies program for all their support for tonight and over the years. The aim of this series is to bring together people of diverse backgrounds to learn together and to discuss ideas and to share ideas. And so we want to thank our community partners, the Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation of Metro Lansing, for helping to get the word out. Lattice, which is linking all types of teachers to international cross-cultural education, and also to the Islamic Center for co-sponsoring tonight's event. So let me tell you how this evening is going to go. And there might be a few bumps because with the hybrid format, I'm certainly still not used to it, but in any case, we're going to begin with, after I stop talking, we're going to have some special remarks from Dr. Camilla Suleiman. She's a member of our Muslim Studies program faculty, Global Studies in the Arts and Humanities program, the Center for Gender and Global Context, and the Department of Linguistics and Languages. So she's going to have a special introduction. Then we'll have about a half-hour talk from Dr. Bamia. And then, and I hope people will stay if they can, for discussion groups, kind of smaller discussion groups, where we'll talk about the book and also about what we heard from Dr. Bamia. We can discuss that. And we have questions that are prepared, so you can, we have that as a guide. And thanks to our discussion group leaders, we're Delilah Pacheco. She's a Fulbright foreign language teaching assistant here this year at MSU from India, teaching Hindi. And Jessica Saba, who's a doctoral student in the School of Social Work. So we're so excited. First time having a School of Social Work graduate student discussion leader. So I'm excited about that too. And I think you're going to enjoy meeting them. At the very end of the evening, we're going to end at 9, don't worry. We're going to wrap up all together as one large group with Dr. Bamia with any questions, insights from the discussion groups. So I wanted to thank very much Dr. Suleiman, who really had this idea to bring Dr. Bamia for sure. And she also first introduced me to the work of this author, Sahar Khalifeh. And really, that really opened my eyes. And I hope those of you who read the book also similarly maybe saw a different world and different points of view. And so, yeah, thank you so much, Camilla, for that. Okay, please come.
Hello. Thank you, Deborah, for this kind introduction. And I thank everyone here and Muhammad Khalil, the Director of Muslim Studies, and Mary Firdausi. But above all, I thank Dr. Aida Bamia. And I am also happy to see people from MSU and from Ann Arbor and even from SUNY Buffalo. So welcome everyone to this evening. Before I introduce Dr. Aida Bamia, I'd like to read a passage that Sahar Khalifeh sent me on becoming a writer. And so I'm going to share it with you. When I started life again, after getting rid of my traditional marriage, all what I was worried about was how to fulfill my long deserted dream and become a writer, a good one, living an oppressed, confined life with no window to look through and see what was going on in my society and the real world made me think that I was not knowledgeable enough, not strong enough, nor intelligent enough to be able to reach my goal. I knew then that my situation as a dissipated housewife was not an individual case. With eyes wide open, I could see what was going on to most women like me, my sisters, my cousins, My neighbors, all of them, including me, of course, were one way or another living a besieged, empty life with no real touch with the real world. What we were familiar with and good at was to breed children, cook, clean, and look appealing to demanding husbands who were not easy to satisfy. Coming out from that barren background, how could I fulfill my hard to get dream and become a writer, a good one? A good writer meant to me to be able to write about the social system, the political system, history, geography, psychology, and all those fields that help the writer succeed in portraying and analyze real people in real life in a convincing and interesting way. Knowing that I had to deal with our complex and grim problems, such as occupation, our military defeats, social and cultural shortcomings, women's depressing status in our society, I was wondering how could I, with my limited and inexperienced abilities, produce literature that makes the reader believe and appreciate the way I look at things. To be able to do that, I thought I should start by re-educating myself. I started by drawing a plan and make myself stick to it. The first step was to go back to school, which I did by enrolling at Birzeit University to study literature. It is true that I was a good reader since childhood, but reading literature as an amateur was not enough. I had to be able to analyze literature. I had to learn how good writers such as Mahfouz, Dostoevsky, Hemingway, and others portray scenes that made the readers believe and enjoy what they read. How to develop characters that make the reader empathize with them. How could I make the reader laugh at my character's stupidities or feel sorry for their defeats? My themes, as I mentioned earlier, were grim and complex. They deal with war, poverty, fighting for liberation, bloodshed, and grudge. How could I deal with repulsive issues in an appealing way? I mean, a way that keeps the reader attracted to what I write and not run away from. Was learning to analyze literature enough? Of course not. My goal was not to become a critic. My goal was to become a writer, a novelist, an artist that was able to delve into people's hearts and souls and bring them to life. So I thought, what I needed was to study psychology, sociology, anthropology, history, and a lot of social, national, and international politics. But would study all that make me a good novelist? Thousands, in fact, millions of graduates who had master's and doctorate degrees in those fields did not become good novelists. What should I do then? What was missing? The answer was to live the lives of the people I write about and be able to digest their experiences. How could I do that? The answer was to go to those people, interview them, touch them, feel them, understand them, empathize with them, and then, only then, portray them. But suppose I wanted to write about a dead person similar to Abdel Qadir al-Husseini. He's a Palestinian national figure. What should I do then? The answer was to read about him, read what he wrote, if he had written anything, interview those who knew him, those who lived with him, his wife, his relatives, sons, daughters, and friends, if they were still living. Look at his pictures, devour his features, and then imagine. Imagine how he used to act and react according to those features. After doing all that, would I be able to empathize with him and be him? Probably I would. So this is how I managed to write about grim and boring issues and made my readers believe and enjoy what they read. The plan I drew and made myself stick to was successful. First, I re-educated myself, acquired the needed tools, and taught myself to make sincere, intimate contact with real people. To be sincere, I selected people I knew and studied those I did not know. I made sure to put my characters in their real backgrounds and made them act and react as close as possible to the features I synthesized. In short, this is my recipe of how to become an honest writer and a convincing novelist. The question now is, did I succeed in my career as a novelist? My answer is, see for yourselves. Do you believe my characters? Can you empathize with them? Are you convinced by the way I portrayed Nidal and Yasmin, Al-Husseini, and Rabia. Can you visualize Al-Husseini's battles and feel sorry for his death? I am just giving you examples from the novel you are dealing with right now. If you read my other novels, you would find the same thing. You would find different characters from different backgrounds portrayed in an appealing and convincing way. How did I manage to do that? By being sincere in doing my homework. Am I exaggerating in celebrating my recipe of how to become a good writer? Am I exaggerating? I don't think so. If I am, you won't be gathered here to evaluate and enjoy a novel written about distant people living in a faraway small country that you probably never heard of or vaguely heard of, a country I fondly name Palestine. So we want to clap our hands to Sahar, who couldn't be with us today, but I am honored that Dr. Aida Bamia made the trip from Florida to come and see us today, and we're very grateful. I would like to introduce Dr. Aida Bamia. Dr. Aida Bamia is a Palestinian American born in Jerusalem, lived in Egypt where she attended French schools. She received her BA in English literature, her MA in Arabic literature, both from the American University in Cairo, and her PhD from the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. The title of her dissertation was The Development of Algerian Novel and Short Story. She taught in Algeria and the USA, University of Florida, was a visiting faculty at Wayne State University and at the University of Michigan, teaching Arabic language and literature. Her major activity since her full-time retirement is translation from Arabic into English, my first and only love being the latest. Welcome, Dr. Aida Bamia.
Thank you for this opportunity really to come and talk to you and introduce a writer that I like very much and I enjoy translating, and also a person. I met Sahar in person more than once in Amman, and I find that her contribution has really enriched our Arabic literature. My concern is not really feminine or women literature and so on. My concern is how much writing contribute to a better humanity and better society. This is what we want. And this is how her books touched me. So what I want to say is that we all know that my first and only love was not Sahar Khalifeh's first novel. She had written many novels before that, and in particular novels that dealt with women and women problems, like the memoirs of an unrealistic woman, and also We Are Not Your Slaves, one of many. While she was especially living in Libya with her husband, she was married really in a kind of an arranged marriage that she did not approve of and so on, but her parents more or less forced her to marry. And while she was in Libya with her husband, where he was working, she used to write, and an activity that her husband never really encouraged. So I have read those books, and I also use them in my teaching at the University of Florida. But I did not really want to translate any of them because personally, I did not find any link or connection with them because I did not live in a traditional, or I did not grow in a traditional Arab family. Both my parents are Palestinian. My mother and I were both from Jerusalem, and my father is a Muslim. My mother is a Roman Catholic practicing, and they had a wonderful understanding and marriage. And my father encouraged the emancipation of women. And he even taught my mother to drive, and and then afterwards she taught us to drive when we immigrated to Egypt. We were grown ups and so on. So this is the environment I grew in, and that's why I couldn't really. I liked what Sahar Khalifeh wrote, and I understood it because I know many families where the women are treated badly, whether they are Palestinians or others, but Arab. And I remember once there was I came to know a Palestinian family, and I saw that the husband was beating his wife, and I told him, she's going to leave you if you continue doing that. He said, no, she doesn't, because that's why they don't want women to be educated, because she cannot earn a living to buy bread and butter. So she will put up with all this. So that's why education is very important for women, definitely. And this is where mainly my father pushed us. Because what happened is that 1948, with the troubles starting in Palestine and the civil war and so on, my mother was working with Zlicha Shhabi. I don't know if some of you know her. She was the president of the Union of Palestinian Women. And also they organized a kind of a first aid group, because there was a civil war and people would be brought to the clinic where they were working and so on, just to help them. So, but gradually the situation in Palestine, we were living in Jerusalem then, became a little bit concerning and dangerous. And that's why my father decided to take us to Egypt, just waiting for things to calm down. And we drove all the way from Jerusalem to Cairo, and we had a small Austin car, and it's a very dear car. Afterwards, it took us a long time to get rid of it, and but anyhow, there are many memories attached to it. And it is there in Egypt that even we shifted more or less our attention to in Palestine. The main language of teaching, foreign language, was English, and this is what families wanted their children to study. But in Egypt, French was much more widespread, and my mother's education was French, and she had studied with at a nun school, and this is where she decided to send us to school, and this gave us, of course, the opportunity to be in control of three languages, really very well: French, English, and Arabic, and so on. And so this is how life in exile in Egypt gave us an opportunity to expand, you know, our freedoms and study and so on. So the reason why, and this is the reason why I did not translate those novels by Sahar Khalifeh, because I understood them, but I did not feel any connection, and I was afraid I will not really portray them properly. But what the first book that that I read for Sahar Khalifeh from her collection about women and so on is The Inheritance. The Inheritance deals with one phase of Palestinian history, and this is the phase where many during the immigration, or even for families who stayed in Palestine and lost their businesses and so on, it was the girls who went to the Gulf countries to teach and to be able to support their families. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. And in the inheritance, there is the story of one of those characters who also went to Kuwait, and she was able to pay for her brother's education, but she lost an opportunity to get married because she was already too old in Arab, and Arab concept and so on. So this is where I see this connection. My first and only love that Khalifa, that attracted me first to Khalifa, is to Sahar Khalifeh, is of course her description of the Palestinian resistance, and also the connection I made with my mother's memory and all the activities of the Union of Palestinian Women with Liqa Shhabi and so on. And in that book, we see the reason why I like it in particular is the premonition that Abdel Qadir al-Husseini, who was fighting against a guerrilla warfare, did not have enough weapons, and they went, he and some of his colleagues, they went to Damascus to ask the Arabs for weapons to be able to organize the fight, but unfortunately he was not given all the help he needed, and he made a prediction in a way. He told them that because Jerusalem was surrounded, and he wanted weapons in order to help the resistance. And he told the Arab leaders who were gathered in Damascus that if we lose Jerusalem, then that will be the end of Arab Palestine. At the same time, also the British mandate was ending, and the British put a lot of restriction on the acquisition of weapons by Palestinians. They used to go and search in their homes, and whenever they found weapons, they used to blow up as we see now happening in many parts of occupied Palestine and so on. So this is how his prediction is coming. And then now there is, of course, most of the Arab countries, if not all, most of them, I would say, have diplomatic relations with Israel and so on. So, and this is, of course, is affecting the Palestinian issue very significantly. Okay. So my first and only love is the second volume in the books that revolve around the occupation. We see the main character Nidal as a young girl, and her name also is symbolic of the situation in Palestine, because Nidal means struggle, and this is how some families used to call their children in order, just to fit within the the understanding of at that time society. So anyhow, Nidal, who became a very important painter, she, I don't know how many of you have read the book and how much do you want me to give you an idea about the content, because Nidal was a young girl whose two uncles used to go. No, one of the uncle was a freedom fighter, and anyhow, so she lived especially with her grandmother and her mother, who was in a bad marriage, married to her cousin and so on, wasn't paying too much attention to her. But gradually, Nidal became a painter, traveled like many Palestinians, left Palestine and became a well-known painter and so on. And then afterwards returned to the family home in order to settle down and continue the struggle in her own way. So the three novels that Khalifa wrote, of noble origins and My First and Only Love, and before that The Inheritance, revolve mainly about female characters who, once freed from their social constraints and the weight of the tradition, became successful. And in a way, this is really what Sahar Khalifeh is herself. This is her experience, because when she was married quite young to a man that she did not like, and who really did not encourage her cultural activities, she devoted all her life to writing and to the cause of women. And also she went back to school, and she came to the US and got her PhD here, and started dealing with issues related to women, and especially political issues. Before talking more about the novel, I would like to say something about Sahar Khalifeh. The first time I met Sahar Khalifeh, I met her in Amman, Jordan. And the reason why we met is that we were struggling to find a title for her book, Asl wa Fasl, okay? And those books were, the books I translated were published by the AUC Press. And we, even at the AUC Press, we didn't know exactly what title to bring, because in Arabic, it's very significant. When you say Asr wa Fasl, you don't need to explain anything more, that you belong to a well-known family and so on. At the end, this is where we met, and finally we accepted, we agreed on the title of noble origin, because this is very important, the family and so on. So anyhow, on a second visit to Amman, I also met with Sahar Khalifeh, and we had dinner at a restaurant. And no, I'm sorry, we had dinner at her house. And this is where I met also her two daughters. By the way, she divorced her husband, about her life. And this is where she dedicated herself to writing, and especially to books dealing with women issues. And she, after that, she came and attended a conference in the US, and then afterwards she was offered a scholarship for her PhD to obtain her PhD in the US, and she was in Oklahoma. and her experience among the Arab community who live in the US is a little bit reflected in the inheritance, where we see the difficulty of adopting or finding a kind of a harmony between Arab traditions and American way of life, especially for women. In general, men have a lot of freedom. No one asks them what they do. And then she herself tells the story of her brother who was pulled by the family because he is a young man and so on. And the women were neglected, and so this is why she insists on strong characters, and she insists on the education of women. And this is how she finally managed to obtain a PhD in literature, which she relates in a book, not in a novel, but a book she wrote titled, as I mentioned earlier, The Story of My Story, how she experienced everything around her, and which is also quite revealing about her books and her position in defending women. I remember when I visited her in Jordan the second time, and we were eating at a restaurant, we met some of her relatives who were also visiting from the Gulf. And when they knew that I wanted to translate one of her books, they wanted to know how long it takes me to translate a book. And I couldn't really give them a time. I said, it doesn't matter, because when you translate, it is as if you're rewriting, really, in a way, the novel. And for me, translating Sahar Khalifeh's books is an emotional exercise. It is not, I mean, the choice was conscious. Also, I translated other books, but the other books were just the work of a translator. But this one, it's but the translation of Sahar books is it involves me personally, because there are certain events and certain emotions that she describes that are very close to me. You know that I translated Baba Sartre written by an Iraqi writer, and also another one, another book, a huge book authored by a Moroccan writer, and Muhammad al-Ash'ari. I don't know if anyone, it's called The Arch, the Butterfly, the Arch and the Butterfly. But there was no connection. I didn't feel any really closeness to the characters and so on. I did it as a duty, okay. So what I would like mainly to come back to the novel translation of this novel and some of her other novels is that they bring back the memories, some painful memories of childhood. on one side. On another side, I had some difficulty in the translation because the book, for those of you who read it, you realize that it is full of names of herbs. Because the grandmother used to collect them, and it's part of really the traditions of this generation where they use lots of herb in cooking, and they know their, of course, Arabic name. And I couldn't find a translation for the names of those herbs in English. Some of them do exist in English, but some did not, and I did not know them. So I remember, I'm telling this story because I would like to give an example of some positive experiences connected to this book. When I was working on my first and only love, while I was talking, anyhow, I was having this difficulty with the translation or finding the names of the herbs. Something happened. I was one day attending a dedication of a dedication at the convent of the Dominican Fathers in Egypt. You know that they have a convent, the Dominican Fathers, and they have a very good library. So I thought maybe they would have a dictionary where I can have Arabic, English, because most of them know Arabic anyhow, and then I would get the names of all those herbs. They did lend me a dictionary, but it was not good enough. I didn't find anything really too much of a help. But a few days later, my sister, who lives in Cairo, she brings me a dictionary, a huge dictionary, in 4 languages, all about herbs, written by an Armenian. And so he gives the names of the herbs, English, French, Arabic, and Armenian. And I found this, it's a treasure. But it is not the dictionary itself, but it is the fact that this person was listening or heard me complain to the Dominican father about the matter, and he knew about this dictionary because the author of the dictionary is an Armenian, and he himself, this man, is of Armenian origin. You know, many Armenians came to Egypt and lived in Egypt. Some of them left, but some of them are still there. And he just offered me this dictionary. It's a huge dictionary, 4 languages. And anyone wonder if you need the names of certain herbs, there is a dictionary available. Let me know ahead of time. It's a huge one. This is. Those are some of the experiences I had working with that book, My First and Only Love. What I would like to do now is to be able to translate her novels, Sahar's novel. They are translated in many other languages, but I discovered, for example, that in French, there is only one of her novels that is translation, which is Bab Saha, the gate of the square, or something of the sort. But I think it should be made available. Another interesting aspect is what Sahar reveals about herself in her book, Hikayati li Hikayati, is that the story behind my stories. She reveals a great deal about herself, which is a chance for people who are doing research on her work. And if I would encourage anybody to read it, because if you want to, you understand better her personality and her life. So, and especially she talks about the difficulties of growing up in a traditional family. For me, it helped me because in my family, we did not have this this tendency. On the contrary, first of all, we are 3 girls and 1 boy, and the boy is an only boy, he's the oldest, but he was never privileged over the girls. And on the contrary, my father always said, you have to, I would like my daughters to see the world so that no one can tempt them by telling them, okay, I can show you this or I can show you that, and so on. And especially his big efforts in pushing us to education, further education. And I remembered that I wanted to stop after my MA and start working, because life, we had all settled in Egypt, and life in Egypt was not very easy. For a permission to work was not easy to get, and usually you needed to have an Egyptian partner with you, and so on. So I thought maybe I can work and help my father, you know, in the expense of the house. So he, of course, refused, and he said, don't stop at your MA. Stopping at MA, it's like standing in the middle of the stairs. The people who are above you don't see you, and the people who are on the lower floor don't see you. So go ahead and continue, and I'll find the money, and so on. Don't worry about that. So those are the reason I'm saying that, because this is the reason why I found this connection, a strong connection with Sahar Khalifeh's book, because I understood the importance of education in her life, and especially girls' education. I don't know the level of her daughter's education, but I'm sure that I heard them speak French, and I'm sure that she's taking good care of them. There are some aspects in the novel also. Do I have time to still talk? Okay. There are some other aspects in this novel that I found very interesting and soothing. She tries to introduce Sahar Khalifeh poetry, folk poetry in the novel. So we have they are translated in there. We have a quotation of from a folk Palestinian poem that she recites in about a bird that comes and you know stands you know at the windowsill and so on. So she responds very well to poetry, but the person I would like to highlight here is Abdul Qadir al-Husseini, who was a freedom fighter, who himself was also a poet. And we translate that, and it is at the first pages of the novel. And I thought, if you don't mind, I would like to read for you, not the whole poem that is in the book, but a few verses from the Arabic version of his poetry, because there's a contradiction between the personality of a freedom fighter and a poet and so on, but we can see those two aspects of his personality in the novel. So I'm going to read that in Arabic. سلاح الفتى طيب الخصال وعزه، عفاف وبأس في الشدائد يرهب، وخير سلاح للمصائب سمعة تفوح جليل الذكر أيان يذهب. بني أقلوا ما استطعتم عصاركم، فرب عصار للمكارم يسلب، ولا ترجع سفر اليدين مؤملا، صنيع الفتى يبقى إذا المال ينضب. And the whole philosophy is in the last line, where speak about it's the action that really stays with us, and no matter how rich a person is, what really the reputation of a person is built on his action and not on the amount of money they have. So I don't know how much, shall we open it to questions so I can answer the question people have, because the novel is very long, and there is a lot to, it's difficult to summarize it also. So, but if you would like to.
Why don't we have about 10 minutes of questions for Dr. Bamia, anything that came up from her talk, both from the online audience or from people here in person, and then we'll still go into our discussion groups after that.
Okay.
Okay, so right now until about 8 o'clock. So I'm gonna look in the chat, do you mind? And see, you don't.
Okay.
It doesn't look like it's a question, so let's wait to see if people have questions. There's, okay, James, let's see, I think I can unmute him. Maybe, yeah. Hi, thank you.
Hello, Professor Bamia. My name is Jim Holston. I'm wondering, I've seen My First and Only Love described as the second volume of a trilogy. I see the connections to Of Noble Origin. Is the third volume out? Is it Ard Wasama, Heaven and Earth? Or is it still being written?
I don't know if I can.
The Inheritance is the third, right? The Inheritance is the third in her historical, yes?
Oh, Horizon? No, I didn't. No.
So he asked, you mentioned that there are 3 historical works of Sahar Khalifeh's.
Yeah.
Of Noble Origins, My First and Only Love, and the third? Yeah,
no.
I think it's Emirat, The Inheritance is the third, right? Set in the Oslo?
No, The Inheritance is not exactly, I mean, it came before, but it is not exactly part of that.
Okay, so
No.
what, he's asking what the third is, or what the 3 books are.
So we have My First and Only Love. We have Asl wa Fasl of Noble Origin, I'm sorry. And yeah, the other one is Surah wa Ayquna wa Ahdun Qadim. It is the image, the icon, and the covenant, and it is translated into English. So this is the one. So that, I don't know if I answered your
think so.
questions. Do you want me to repeat that?
Did you heard her reply, Jim?
I heard the reply, but in 2014, I don't read Arabic, but I know that in 2014, she published Ard Wasama, Heaven and Earth. Is that the third volume in this trilogy about?
The Inheritance is translated, okay, and then Of Noble Origins, of course, and then the image, the icon, and the covenant is also translated. So those are they're all available in English. And she, you know, that she received the Naguib Mahfouz award for this book.
The image, the icon, and the covenant.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the third. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions? Did you hear? So Camilla mentioned the Ard Wasama. The Jim mentioned that book. Where does that fit in? Is it part of it?
Which one? The
Ard Wasama.
Ardu Sama, oh yes,
Sama.
okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, there is, the third volume that needs to be, I mean, they are connected because the characters continue, we know some of them pass away, but some continue. In Ardu Sama, this is the last novel she published so far. In Arabic, it's not translated, but it is, it takes us outside Palestine because some of the characters went to Lebanon, in Beirut, and then some also went to Latin America. And there is Anton Saada who appears also in this volume. So it is really different, and I hope I'll be able, to start translating it.
Yeah.
But it is quite a thick book, and it's quite interesting.
Thicker than this one?
Thicker than this
Oh,
one,
no.
yeah. But I think it's very important
Sounds
because
very interesting.
you follow the characters,
Yes.
especially the boys, anyway. And of course, some of them, the older brother dies in their Yasin because there was a massacre,
Yes.
and he went there to see his wife, and he was
that's
among the
continued.
people, yeah. But the younger one, who was in love with a woman who really did not care for him, goes to Beirut, and then afterwards we know they are influenced by Anton Saada and his policy and so on, and so we have Latin America that appears in on the scene, yeah.
Okay, Jim, did she answer your question? Now we really wanted that one to be translated.
Yes, she did. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Bamia, and thank you for your wonderful translations too.
You're welcome. I would like to say something for those of you who want to really understand Sahar Khalifeh and her work, to read her book, Hikayati li Hikayati, which is the story of my stories, because this is where she reveals a great deal. First of all, it is beautifully written. Her Arabic style is wonderful. And she reveals the change in her personality, which is reflected in her books, where after being in a very bad marriage, she divorces her husband, and she has two daughters. And when she received the scholarship to go and study in America, she left her two daughters with her mother. But both her mother and father and brother did not encourage her education, because there is also a fear if the women are too educated, then they become too independent because they can earn a living and so on. But anyhow, because she suffered from that husband, they didn't say anything. And her mother accepted to take care of the girls and of her two girls and so on. But it's a beautiful book. And Sahar Khalifeh said that there is a second volume coming, but I don't know. Maybe we need... I didn't have time to ask her, but I will ask her and find out, because she really explains the background of a writer, and we rarely had situations like this. Yeah.
But that one has not been translated to English yet.
No, it hasn't been translated to any language. I
see.
think it should be translated.
Yes.
Yeah, there is a lot of work to do. Yeah.
Yes, there are some interviews with her in English that people can read, and if anybody wants, I have some references to those.
Yeah, no, it hasn't,
over the years.
hasn't been translated. Yeah. Okay.
Here's a question.
Yes.
So earlier you said that translating my first and only love was different than translating some of the
I don't think I heard.
Okay.
Testing.
So earlier you were talking about how translating this book was different than other works you had translated because... Okay. So earlier you were saying that translating this book was different than like other works you had translated because there was more of a personal connection to it.
Other works?
Like other works you have translated, and like how this was different because you had a personal connection to it.
Yeah. Speak about my first and only love. This is and then also her other works at the beginning. most of them were about women rights and so on. You even, I wanted to bring copies, I don't know if you have them in the library, but there is a copy of a woman standing there and holding
A microphone?
okay. I'm sorry. Holding a broom and cleaning material and so on. And people expect women to do everything anyhow. And so it was a time when she herself was suffering as a woman. Bab al-Saha, a little bit, she starts, there's a reaction. But and that reflects, her life with her husband and how much she endured. Her husband did not want her to write, and whenever she used to write, short stories or whatever, she used to hide the copies, her, the rough copies and so on, her writing, because otherwise her husband would destroy it. And she did that behind his back in a way. So anyhow, so during the time when she was suffering so much, this is when she was writing about women issues and then how society looked at them. But after her divorce and so on, things changed. When she went to the United States, she dealt with another issue, which we know, and probably many of you know here because there is a large Arab community in Michigan, is that the conflict between still the Arab traditions and also the American way, and then how the young people who grow up here and are exposed to American culture, they are in conflict with the values and so on. And very often there are stories I heard because I taught, I was in Michigan for 3 years, and I was very close to the Arab community, and I heard stories about girls leaving, escaping from their houses, and the parents being concerned because this is the reputation not only of the girl who, the reputation stains the whole family and all the unmarried women and so on. So it was very important to do that. And those families who immigrated to Egypt, immigrated to America, kept the traditions that they carried with them so many years ago that are changing also back home in the Arab countries. The people don't realize how emancipated women are in different degrees, but in general, and education and work and so on. So there was a time when I was teaching, because I taught Algerian literature, and the early novels written but where Algerian women were asking also for education and so on. The fear of the parents was always is that the moment they learn how to write and read, they will write love letters to men outside in society, as if that was the only concern. And there are stories of this kind. So, but this is disappearing. And what helped the Palestinian women is that with the Nakba, it was the girls with the parents who could not find a job, who were employees in a bank, or they had jobs which they could not replace in the land of exile. It was the girls who started working and supporting their families. And that's why I mentioned the inheritance, because one of the daughter was working in Kuwait, and she paid for the education of her brothers who went to Germany to study and were emancipated and so on. And when she wanted to live her life and so on after, and she was of a certain age already, people were shocked. But she said, it's my right to live like a human being. Why do you accept that a foreign person or a foreign woman enjoy this kind of freedom and so on? So in a way, there seems like a contradiction. The Palestinian tragedy helped the emancipation of Palestinian women. Of course, nothing replaces the homeland, but there are other compensation. I mean, for me to be able to come, first of all, to get this opportunity of education, in England, and afterwards to study, to come and teach in America and so on, and live there and enjoy the privileges of the Americans and then also introducing my culture to the American students and so on. This is a privilege. This is a wonderful opportunity also. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I enjoyed the talk very much. I have more of a commentary rather than a question.
Yeah.
And that is Sahar Khalifeh herself in her characters, when they move to Haifa or to Jerusalem, the women from Nablus, her hometown,
Yeah.
feel jealous
Yeah.
of the freedom that women in Haifa and in Jerusalem have, and they don't.
Yeah. Nablus is a traditional city, by the way. It has changed a little bit, but it is a traditional city.
Yeah.
And I know I have visited Nablus, and I realize that, for me, it is very difficult I understand, but it is difficult to talk or to about the concept of women being deprived of their freedom, because really I think we were lucky, first of all, having parents, especially a father. My mother was more, she's Roman Catholic, she passed away many years ago, but very religious and so on. And she was more conservative than my father. And my father used to fast Ramadan, but none of us also fasted with him. It didn't matter. He never put pressure on us to do it. He said, just sit with me to eat, because I like to have everybody around me and so on. And growing in this kind of environment was just really a lucky thing. And he's the one who pushed us to learn to drive. And he used also to push us education and so when I returned to Jerusalem, and I did go, the advantage of being American, to be able to go to the West Bank and to visit places of the childhood. Of course, we lived in Bab Zahra. This is the family house in front of the Rockefeller Museum. This is where we lived. And now the family house is a restaurant, by the way, which is very painful. But also we grew up, and this is, I couldn't mention everything. And this is very important for me. We had, my father's hobby was planting olive trees and do gardening and things like that. So he bought a land in Kalandia, and Kalandia is halfway between Ramallah and Jerusalem. This is where we used to spend our summers. And he used to come only, the weekend, because he had his job and so on. And so this is, it gives you a lot of freedom, where you just walk everywhere and so on. And being deprived of that was very important, and for white people at the same time. And I know for my father, although Egypt is a wonderful place, but there were restrictions on Palestinians, the work and so on, and they couldn't even buy property. Now things have changed and it's different. But I remember my father, because he had this love for the land and planting flowers he filled the balcony of the apartment where we lived. He filled it with pots of flowers and so on. And somebody told him, you have to be careful, because it can affect the stability and so on, because those huge balconies. So things remain with you. Your homeland remains with you. You cannot lose. It is so very important to have a watan, what you say, a watan, and nothing replaces it. Money, prestige, nothing replaces it. There is a compensation and you find some solace, but nothing the same. So Calendia now we sold it and somebody else is taking care of it. But I know the first time I went visiting, and there is a house where we used to stay in the summer and so on, and I saw it. You know, the guardian of the who took over, looked after the land, was living there with his family. You know, because the owners were far away, we couldn't go very often and so on. So. Those are some of the difficulties, and people don't understand, and they think, okay, you make money, you have a good position, you are rich. What more do you want? No, a homeland is very important. So it's very, and I care very much about my Arab American citizenship. The only country where when I return, they tell me welcome home. But you know, yes, I'm comparing that to some Arab countries, and it's painful to say that, because you know, when I go to Egypt, I have to take a residency to renew my residence and so on, and no one tells me welcome home, and this is really in a way home. But when I arrive in the U.S., usually I arrive in Atlanta and so on, tell me welcome home, and those are only words, but they mean something. They, you know, you feel them in your heart. And I remember the first time I went to Jordan, I had in laissez-passer. This is what the Palestinian got. I remember that when I crossed, you know, I went to the officer in charge of visas and so on. When he looked at the passport and he wanted to return to me, he threw it like this, instead of handing me the passport. So those are things. And for a very long time, and until now, I think the Jordanians feel something. Let me tell you a story. I was doing research collecting Jordanian folk poems, and especially folk poems and so on. And I met many native Jordanians, Bedouins everywhere. Some of them were very nice, and they opened their homes and they invited me to eat with them and so on. But I remember one of them, he said, you know, in our country, in Jordan, there are 2 foreign groups that we need to get rid of. So I told him, I know one, but I want you to tell me the second. I know one, the Palestinian. I could say that, okay. But he didn't dare say it. They feel that also King Hussein and his family and the Hashemites are foreigners. Those came from the Arabian Peninsula, you know? And so it is terrible. And sometimes people say, why? I mean, this Arab word you speak, we have the wealth of the same language, and we are not appreciative of it. And then you see here in the US, and I said, look at the America, how you know, there are, of course, disagreements and so on, but you care about your country, and to have this feeling of belonging to a country is very important. It's very important for any person in a way. So I mean, I am retired now and so on, and every time my sisters say, why don't you come and, you know, resettle in Egypt, or, you know, and so on. So there is something, you know, I'm very comfortable in the US in every way. So those are some, this is part of the Palestinian pros and cons, the good and the bad, let me say, the good and the bad in many ways, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing the personal stories. It means a lot to us. And we have one comment in the chat that I'm going to read, and then we really will go into the discussion groups. Professor Mark Bernstein says it's bitterly ironic that Calandia is the main checkpoint between the northern West Bank and Jerusalem, used by the Israeli military to control Palestinian access to East Jerusalem and Israel. Did you hear the comment on Calandia? that it's the checkpoint there.
Oh, there is, yeah. You want me to comment on
Yeah,
it?
yeah, not me.
Okay. Um, okay. You know, okay. Um, anyone has visited the West Bank or Kalandia is somewhere between Ramallah and Jerusalem. Kalandia, for me, like Sahar Khalifeh or her character in My First and Only Love, this is the childhood of freedom, and this is where I used to climb the trees, and especially the fig trees. And I like figs very much. You climb the trees, and I used to sing. I have a terrible voice. I cannot keep a note straight, but no one heard me. No one would care, really. And when I was, before we immigrated to Egypt, I was very outspoken. And when I immigrated, and I didn't mention that, when we immigrated to Egypt, and first of all, the Egyptians did not know much about the Palestinians. And they thought that we lived in tents and so on and so forth. And they would ask very strange questions, although we knew a lot about the Egyptians. And the dialect is slightly different. And when you are young, you do not easily adapt to the dialect. And I remember that, just as a joke, my mother asked us to go and buy blue indigo. Blue indigo, when people they wash the white sheets and so on, they put blue indigo. You probably also do not know that, no. But this is, and she said, can you buy, and it is called Nile in Arabic. And Nile for the Egyptian is an insult when they say getting Nila. So may you, I don't know, I mean, the worst thing, I don't even find the word. I don't know if you have a word for this, but it was terrible. And they used to make fun of our talk, or to just ask us to speak and to be entertained by the way we talked. Yeah, I mean, it was terrible. And for us, we knew so much about Egypt, and to see that they knew little about Palestine. And for us, Palestine was, the whole world. And this is the Holy Land and so on. It was very painful. It was very painful. And also at the same time, we also saw the difficulties for survival. Both, my mother never worked, but my father had also, when Nasser came to power, he allowed the Palestinians to work in Egypt, but to have an Egyptian partner. They couldn't have their own business. Until now, this is the story. But at least they could work. So to see how my parents were trying to cover our expenses. We all went to private schools, non-schools, or the father schools and so on, because this is what they wanted for us. It was not very easy. And my father would say, we'll find a way, we'll find a way. And I remember once I wanted to work, to go and teach and so on, to help. He said, don't worry. I mean, it hurt him that I would say. He said, do you miss anything? I'm trying to give you everything. Do you miss anything? But you see, we didn't, because we felt that he was even depriving himself of things so that we would be happy as a family. I don't know how young Palestinian men are, but in general, Palestinian men, my father's generation, were good husbands, good fathers, and they provided for their homes. But I know that now we are in a different world, different generations, and so things change in a way. But those are difficult. So Kalandia was a place where I had total freedom. And I remember my sister, I wanted to bring a lot of pictures, but maybe I can probably in a way send them to you and you can publish them, because she used to make overalls for us, overhauls, and then boots, because she was afraid, of bites and so on. And you would go, and she never worried about us because, there were guardians and so on, and we had total freedom, which of course in Jerusalem you cannot go just anywhere and so on. And so that's why it is a symbol of freedom, the freedom that a child seeks, the freedom of being able to play and just to be part of nature. And I remember that the peasants of the village, because there is a village, Kalandia, at that time we were a bit distant from the village. The house was built a little bit closer to the main road. But now I went to Kalandia and it is very different. But anyhow, the peasant used to bring the fertilizer for my father, and they bring them on donkeys or mules and so on. And until he gave them the money and paid them, I used to ride those mules and so on. So this is it, and this is the kind of life that sometimes I feel that my sisters did not enjoy, but you can't have everything. Yeah.
Until 67, you could visit.
Sorry?
Right? Until 1967,
Yeah.
you could go back. Yeah.
Yeah.
When Jerusalem, the West Bank was taken. So you continued to visit?
Yeah, I continue. I can go with the American passports.
No, until 67. Until 1967,
Ah.
you were allowed to go to.
Yeah, you can, but we didn't have Jordanian passports. We had travel documents for Palestinian refugees. And until now, I have two sisters in Egypt. This is what they have. The difference is that we used to renew it at the beginning in Egypt. Every 3 months, we had to renew our residency. And then it became every year. And then it became every 5 years. And every time I returned from Algeria, where I was teaching, I would spend my summer, because your driver's license and everything is connected. But now they give them 5 years. I know from my sister, I have two sisters who still have, travel documents. They can renew it every 5 years. But my sister has a very nice shop anyway in Zamalek, and her partner is an Egyptian lady. She's the daughter of Egypt's, her father used to be ambassador to Egypt in the US and so on. So this is fine. But it doesn't belong to my sister all alone. They are partners, half and half and so on. But in a way, the number of Palestinians in Egypt is very small now. Their numbers are very small because many of them immigrated, many of the younger generation, and some are in Ramallah. They live in Ramallah, or some are in the camps also. This is another thing. I didn't visit the camps, but I know in Jordan there are camps in near Kalandia. There's the Kalandia camp also, and so on. So there are some real problems, but people. They, in a way, and I remember I saw a kind of a video of a Kuwaiti woman who was talking about her gratitude to the Palestinian teachers who taught her, when the Gulf War started and so on. And she said, they are the ones who taught us, because and I know I have cousins who went to Saudi Arabia and who went to Kuwait in order to work and support the family, because the father lost his business, or he had a business that he could not run, or a position in a way, even in Egypt. I have a cousin on my mother's side. She worked as a typist because her father was a banker, and he couldn't have the same position in Egypt, the same bank. And he tried, I think it was Barclays Bank and so on. They didn't give him the position. So there are still, I think the story of the Palestinian tragedy has not been told, all of it, and I think we probably should do that. So that's why Sahar Khalifeh's books about the tragedy touch me very much, because I did either personally endure that or I know persons who endured. But the other ones about women in freedom, independence, that's I really did not miss anything of that, and have total freedom in the correct sense, in the positive sense of the way, and so on. And this is what allowed me to be able to come and compete with American scholars to get my job at University of Florida, because there was they wanted to start an Arabic program. We have a very good center for African studies, and they wanted to cover North Africa, and that was my field. And I came for the interview, and I was able to get it. And this is thanks to the opportunities we had to study and so on. And I remembered when I met one of the people who was considered for the job, and he told me, I didn't know, and he told me, you took my job. He said, took my job anyway. But it is honest competition, I say. That's what it is. Yeah.
Thank you so much. What we're going to do right now is we're going to have the discussion groups. Those of us in person are going to go to this table in the back with Jessica, and those of you who are online are going to be with Delilah. She will lead you with, there's some discussion questions that Dr. Bamia and I have prepared. We hope you'll stay to discuss them, and you can also discuss other things of interest from what Dr. Bamia talked about.
So that in Jerusalem, in Palestine, exist in both societies. I was very surprised when I was in Palestine to see many of the Jewish women who belong to the conservative group covering their hair, which they don't do in the US and in the West. And then a Jewish colleague of mine who was teaching at the University of Florida, she said they don't do that in the Western society, but they shave their hair and they wear a wig. But those who are in Jerusalem, I saw them. They have even a white cover, and they cover their hair. And they usually have large families, many children. Most of them, you see them with their children and so on. So to blame it on conservative and religious and attachment to religion, I don't think this is a problem at all. It is in a way to avoid and escape facing the real problem as a political problem than anything else. That's my answer in a way. So I think it's good to go and see the Israeli society from inside and see what in some see what the real problem is. I was a little bit surprised to see the growing number of women covering their hair among also the Palestinians, the Arab community, but this it doesn't put an end to the role in society. On the contrary, many of them, especially those whose husbands or any of the husbands or brothers and so on are in prison, they have to work in order to guarantee a living. So covering their hair, if they are comfortable, that's fine. Their choice is not the big issue, as long as also they are educated. And Gaza, which was known to be a conservative region, women are studying and achieving a lot of progress, and with many with very important jobs and so on. And let me tell you another thing is that we were talking about the West, the Palestinians who immigrated to the US or Europe and so on. But many of the Palestinians really built the emirates. They went to work there, and it is the very educated. I know myself many who were working in Algeria, engineers, doctors, teachers, and so on, who went to the Emirates, and they really spread education and help those countries. So that's why I was very impressed and appreciative for the Kuwaiti, the person whom I saw somewhere on television, who was expressing her gratitude for her Palestinian teachers who taught her at the beginning, and because some people were denying it and so on. So this is the story in a way.
I think it seems we have one final question from Rihanna. Can you explain the significance on why you chose that specific cover photo for the book, for the translation?
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
My book was published by the AUC Press, and I like the person who deals with the publication of books translated from Arabic and so on. And I suggested a few covers for her. Yes, and you know, those covers you might be interested to know and this one comes from a calendar that is sold from Canada to help Palestinian artists. And I like to contribute to them. And I had selected another photo. I had selected another one, which is the image much more colorful. And then afterwards, and this picture, this painting was also on the calendar, and this is what the person who deals with the, with whom I was discussing the publication, she preferred with her group, and they chose this picture. And maybe this is a more, I think, for a foreign reader who reads in English, is more attractive. Or it is more significant because you have the Dome of the Rock, you have the olives. The olives are very symbolic for the Palestinians. And then you have the women wearing their traditional dress. And then the traditional dress is very important. And we know that UNESCO now has adopted Palestinian embroidery as, so, and this is what it is.
And also,
Yeah, and then here too. So this is the reason. So that was not my 100% choice, but it was still, I liked it afterwards. That's how, and I like to please the press because they really have been working very well with me, and I hope now we'll be able to. I'll start working on the translation of the last volume, which is Ard wa Sama, and then we'll see, because I think we need to know what happened to those characters in many ways. Okay.
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And we'll have to find that calendar, right, from the Canadian
I will-
organization?
Yeah.
Okay.
I will send you the address if you want.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
You're
Yes, and
welcome.
I think we're going to
imagine.
wrap up. This is a resource for people that Mark Bernstein mentioned, an article from Forbes that you can look up, and I can share with the people that are here. But I think since it's after 9,
Things that they might, okay.
yeah, Israeli and Palestinian women, the only way forward is together, an article in Forbes.
Yeah.
So you might be interested in
I-
that.
I agree.
So thank you so much. We just
You're
loved
welcome.
having you here, hearing your stories,
Thank you.
the stories of your people. It's been an honor, and also the diversity of Palestinian experiences and
Yeah.
the diversity within Jerusalem
Yeah.
society at that time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It was really a pleasure. It was a pleasure to thank you for your interest and for this opportunity, really. And knowing you, getting to know you, this is wonderful. Thank you.